Welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode number 140, of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. We call these episodes Fraternity Foodie because there is nothing like great food to bring people together. Now, go and check out the new book that we released 3 weeks ago. It's called From Letters to Leaders, Creating Impact on Your College Campus and Beyond. It's available on your Kindle, only $2.99, or you can have the paperback shipped to you for only $9.99 on Amazon. So a great deal. Go check it out to all the fraternity and sorority leaders that are listening. Today, we have with us my good friend, Tyler Manning. He serves as the Assistant Director for Fraternity and Sorority Life at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, where he has the privilege and the opportunity to work with 20 fraternities and sororities, 4 governing councils. Tyler also serves as a volunteer for the Association of Fraternity and Sorority Advisors, the Association of Fraternal Leadership and Values, and of course, Sigma Pi Fraternity. Tyler is a 2016 graduate of Ball State University's Master of Arts in Student Affairs Administration in Higher Education program, where he also earned a certificate in university and college teaching. He's also a 2014 graduate of Saginaw Valley State University, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science and criminal justice. In case you're wondering, his top 5 strengths: focus, discipline, individualization, achiever, and responsibility. It is a joy. It is a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome to the show, Tyler.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to all of those who are listening. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I really appreciate the ask and offer to be here with you, and to just kind of share a lot about my story and my experiences and how I can be of support. I've appreciated the relationship you and I have built over time, and so I was excited to get the call to be a part of the Fraternity Foodie podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And like I was telling you before we started recording, it's just, I really appreciate the time that we have now during the pandemic to just sit down and, just chat for 30 minutes, because you and I, we have all the distractions in the world. If we let it distract us, we can be on phones, we can be answering emails, but it's just nice to just have 30 minutes together where we get to chat and catch up on everything that's going on. And I think that is one of the silver linings that I'm going to remember about the pandemic is, this time where we could just get to dedicate to catching up, and then we'll get back to the rest of the world after.
100%. I was thinking about all of the programs and meetings and conferences that we've been in connection to, and when we see each other, we're like, hey, how are you? And let's find some time to catch up. That time is finally happening, right? And I think we've been able to see that happen across the pandemic, is people have been able to find spaces to create for themselves and for one another to just catch up and be like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? I think more so now than ever, we have been asking that question to each other, because I think at the end of the day, we care about one another and we want to make sure we're doing well. And especially in this world where things are just constantly evolving and changing, knowing that there's people out there that care about you and want to make sure that you're doing well is so wonderful to have.
Yeah, I do care about you. And, I think about, it was funny, I was having another conversation about some of the fraternity and sorority advisors that we have out there. And, the demands on your time is tremendous. I mean, let's just call it what it is. And, we talk about this, other duties as assigned. And I was talking to another Greek advisor who, had literally was making beds in the quarantine dorms for students who got infected with COVID-19. This was the other duties as assigned for this particular Greek advisor. And I'm like, oh my God, I know that you are an office of one at this particular campus, and you have all of these additional duties and responsibilities on top of what you are already doing. And I'm like, what are we doing? How is this happening?
Yes, 100%. I think that we have become jacks of all trades, and in some capacities. I think we talk about what hat am I wearing today, right? I think about I recently did for our student government, I was the moderator of their presidential debates. Our student government falls within our student involvement office, but who knew that as a fraternity advisor, I would be moderating student government debates and who knew that I would have to become in about 12 months, have to become a public health expert to help support our fraternities and sororities on our campus and navigating what has become a global health pandemic. And it just, but I will say, I think with that, it does come with its own benefit that you get to learn a lot in the work that we do that is transferable across the board, which I think is something that we often sometimes take for granted.
Yeah, I agree completely. I wanted to give our listeners a little bit of background. You decided on Saginaw Valley State University for your undergraduate experience. And I'm wondering, why was Saginaw Valley the right place for you?
Yeah, great question. So I'm a first generation college student graduate. And so when I was exploring colleges, I knew I wanted to stay in the state of Michigan. I was that bird that didn't really want to leave the nest or didn't really want to go too far away from home. And so I started exploring lots of institutions in the state. And it wasn't until I went to Saginaw Valley that I was like, I feel like I can fit here. Like it's the right fit for me. The campus was just beautiful. They have the #1 ranked residence halls in the state of Michigan. And so I was like, it just felt right. I think what came along with it feeling right was I knew when I went to college, I really wanted to join a fraternity and wanted to get involved. And that was a huge aspect of my decision. Was I knew that there was a growing student life experience at Saginaw Valley. But I would be remiss to say that the decision to go to Saginaw wasn't also financial, right? So being a first generation college student, I had no idea how much college really actually costs. And so I was actually awarded a full tuition scholarship for Saginaw Valley State University, which made my decision partially a little bit easier because I was like, it's a great fit. It's going to make me it's got the degrees I'm looking for, and it also has the way I want to get involved. And I'm not going to have to pay as much. Like, sign me up. Let's get going. And so those are really the major decisions. It was about an hour away from my hometown in Davison, Michigan. And so I knew it was the right place for me. And everything that transpired from the moment I made that decision to commit to Saginaw Valley has just made that decision to choose Saginaw Valley the right one.
Yeah, I think that's great. No debt. I mean, that's fantastic. So if you can find a way to get scholarships and go to college and have the experience that you want, by all means, take it from a guy who, paid off his student loans many, many years after. Find a way to get those scholarships and make those decisions. That's really smart. And of course, you're a lifelong member of Sigma Pi Fraternity. You served as chapter president. You were involved with the IFC and the All Greek Council, and now you continue to volunteer for the fraternity. So talk about your experience with Sigma Pi. How does that shape you today?
Yeah, great question. So I think, so I joined Sigma Pi my first semester as a freshman at Saginaw Valley. When I said a little bit, but when I went to SVSU, I knew I wanted to join a fraternity. Now, did I know which fraternity? Did I know what Greek letters were? No. And so of course I reached out to our Office of Student Life at Saginaw Valley to be like, how do we get involved? How do I learn this? And I won't forget, fraternity recruitment was happening in August, and I'm so sorry. Such a part of my experience I just completely skipped over. When I moved in to Saginaw Valley into my residence hall, the person who helped me move in was the current president of Sigma Pi.
Yes.
And I completely forgot that. And that I think is a really important piece because he made a really good impression on my grandparents and my family that were there to help me move in. That when I said hey, I am interested, talk to my family about wanting to join a fraternity, they said, which one? I said, do you remember Jacob, the president that helped me move in? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, it's his fraternity. I'm really interested in learning more. Can I are you good with me going to events and learning more about what being in a fraternity would be like? And because of that initial interaction, they were they were super supportive, which I know that is a privilege that I have, that my family is supportive of me joining a fraternity. And so I was like, cool, I can go check out Sigma Pi first before I maybe look at the other groups. And Jacob was just was such a welcoming fraternity man. For me, as like this young little freshman who's never been on a college campus before, low key, I'm not a huge sports person, but the first like fraternity recruitment event I went to was watching football, and all I kept thinking is, I'm gonna have nothing to say to these people. I'm gonna walk in and just be very like that awkward freshman. But I'll be honest, it was one of the most welcoming spaces I had walked into for my my initial experience at college, and so I soaked it up like a sponge being in a fraternity. As you mentioned, I served as the chapter president. I was actually on our executive board my entire undergraduate experience after being initiated. So I was initiated in probably that November timeframe, and we were doing elections. And at that time, as we transitioned, in my first year, I joined the board as our secretary, and I stayed on the board in different capacities all the way until I graduated. And I think it was because of that that really got me thinking about how can I help support the fraternity and sorority community on our campus more, which is where I got involved with our interfraternity council and our all Greek council, because I realized that while I was a member of Sigma Pi and I could make some change and could do some really great things to develop our members and to get us into a good spot, I knew that even in the years of 2010, 2014, there was a stigma about what it meant to be a fraternity member or being a sorority member. And I wanted to be a part of like the larger conversations that were happening on our campus about how fraternities and sororities can play an important role in the leadership development of students, which, right, I say all of that now. That is not what I was saying when I was an undergrad. I was very much like, I just want fraternities and sororities to like have more space. And I want them to be more publicized and like supported, really. And so, as you mentioned, it was a passion of mine and truly has transformed my career trajectory, if I'm being honest. So when I was in undergrad, for probably my first 3 years, I was very much so like, I'm going to go to law school. And that was my dream. That was my passion. But it wasn't until I really got like really in depth with Sigma Pi Fraternity and a few of my other student involvement experiences that I was like, I like this stuff. And it was a mentor of mine in undergrad, Rachel, our director of orientation, who was actually the first person to say to me like, hey, have you thought about student affairs? And so it kind of like caught me off guard that the people who I'd been interacting with in orientation and our student life office, like that was a real job. Like you got to do this and work with students on a daily basis. And so I think my kick off with being a member of Sigma Pi and as an undergraduate student really helped to change my decision about wanting to go into law school. I won't lie, got a really not a great score on the LSAT, so that also changed my decision easily. But it really was I could do this for a living. And so actually, as I was exploring what my next step was after undergrad, I was kind of up in the air. I was really interested in potentially joining Sigma Pi's executive office staff as a consultant, as I know many people think about doing as an affiliated member of like, I can go work for my headquarters or my executive office for a couple of years, maybe as a consultant and travel and meet all these new chapter people and then make a decision about what I want to do next. And so actually, as I was in my junior year, senior year, I was in processes about what if I could join the consultant team for Sigma Pi, or what if I went to grad school and got a master's degree? And so I eventually made the decision I was going to go to graduate school, and knew though that being a alumni member of Sigma Pi was going to be able to still give back. And so, as a lifelong member, I think the first thing I'll say is I think a lot of people say like, oh, I was in Sigma Pi. You're always in Sigma Pi. Or the organization that you have membership in. Like it doesn't end after those 4 years or your 5 years at college. There's so many ways to be involved once you've graduated. And so like for me, for example, even though I've moved multiple states from Michigan, I've served as a chapter advisor for our Illinois state chapter of Sigma Pi. And I'll be honest, it's probably one of my most meaningful experiences that I've had, because the chapter was re-establishing their organization on Illinois State's campus when I started as their chapter advisor. And so for me, it was really kind of a full circle moment when I was serving as their chapter advisor for a few years, is that like I was doing and giving back in a way that I received guidance and mentorship and support from my chapter advisor, Jason, who we called Slack. and was really just a huge support for me. And so being able to kind of see that continue to happen, and to see myself in that same role and to be leading an advisory team, I just continue to think like my Sigma Pi fraternity experience is going to continue, and I'm excited to see the ways that I'm able to continue to give back to the organization and to support the work that is being done, to really shape men who are joining Sigma Pi across the country.
I love that perspective. And I hope, more fraternity men, more sorority women adopt that same philosophy, especially, in IFC and Panhellenic. It just seems that, many times it's a 4-year experience for many of those members. Many of them don't attend a national convention or a leadership conference or anything like that. And I think about all the missed opportunities, whether, as a volunteer. I mean, you and I have taken so much from being an alumni volunteer, from staying connected with students, and we get that privilege to work with students all across the country every single day. And none of that is possible without that chapter experience that we both benefited a great deal from. And so I just hope that more fraternity men and more sorority women adopt that philosophy, that this is a lifelong experience that I'm committing to at the altar, and that they continue that. They continue to give back and find ways to volunteer and pay it forward to the next generation. So.
Right, exactly. And I think, it's also this piece of knowing that like when you're exploring wherever your next step is after you leave your undergraduate institution, like, is there an alumni network out there in the city that you're going to be going to, or the area that you're going to be living in? I think what I have really appreciated is I think for knowing all of our alumni range in age, I've appreciated having the Facebook pages where we've got the Sigma Pi Alumni Network, we've got Sigma Pi in Student Affairs and Higher Education, right? So like it's even like a smaller sector of Sigma Pi's that are grad students, professionals in the industry that I'm working in, and it's just been so good to have that relationship and that connection. And so I encourage anyone who is planning to graduate to like reach out. You could reach out to your executive office or your headquarters and say like, hey, I'm going to be an alumni. I'm moving to Edwardsville is near St. Louis, so I'm going to use St. Louis as a plug. Hey, I'm moving to St. Louis. Is there any alumni associations or alumni spaces for our organization in this area? And if there isn't, trust and believe your executive office and be like, great, let's see if we can get some people together to create something in that area for alumni of your organization, which I think is just such a great opportunity to connect with people that aren't from necessarily what would be considered your home chapter, but are still have a common bond and experience in your fraternal membership.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about some of the differences in campuses, because you were getting your master's degree at Ball State. At that time, you served as a grad assistant for the Office of Student Life and Greek Life. So how did that FSL community at Ball State differ from what you had already experienced at Saginaw Valley?
Great question. I think on a very superficial level, the community at Ball State was significantly larger.
Yeah.
So our community at Saginaw Valley had we had 3 IFC fraternities, 3 Panhellenic sororities, 1 being a local, and we had 3 or 4 NPHC fraternities and sororities. And so at Ball State, I'm not going to be able to say those numbers right off the top of my head, unfortunately, but plenty more. I want to say we had, I think it was about 14 IFC, 7 NPC or Panhellenic, and about 6 NPHC, if I'm remembering correctly, and 1 culturally based sorority. And so like just size in terms of number of organizations and then also size of chapters was a wake up call to me that like that's a thing. The other piece that I think from a superficial piece that was different is Ball State's community had housing for many of their chapters. Saginaw Valley, we have what would probably be considered satellite houses, right? Like people live together, but there's no official letters. There's no process for how that is managed. It just happens to be right at a house or an apartment that people have rented and they're just living together. And that unofficially becomes like, oh yeah, that's the Sigma Pi house people live in. So I think that was a shift for me. And also just being on a staff supporting a community and recognizing that the role I needed to play as an advisor, not as an undergraduate leader, which I think is a huge shift and change that I think often many fraternity sorority members who are like, I really want to go into higher education and student affairs. I want to be a Greek advisor, or I want to be a fraternity sorority advisor. They have to realize that like that is great. We need really good people to do this, but it's not to continue your undergraduate experience in your fraternity or sorority, because your mindset and the work that you're doing is going to shift. There's just things that were in place at Ball State related to, risk prevention, to the staffing structure, the support that's provided, the rich history of fraternities and sororities at Ball State, that just impacted what we were doing. I continued to think about, like, as I went through my experience at Ball State and working with the fraternity and sorority community, I just thought about all of the things. I'm like, yeah, we didn't do that at Saginaw Valley. We didn't even know that was a thing. I felt it felt almost like a disconnect in a little bit for my undergrad, when I was thinking about all of these, like, high level umbrella organization resources that I was clueless about. Yeah. That I just didn't know were out there, and didn't realize that there were things that would help us as an organization, or help in a fraternity council, for example, to be better. And so then going to Ball State and knowing that all of this is there, all of this rich history and resources are out there for us, really helped to shape my experience and shape my perspective, as it relates to, like, working with fraternities and sororities. And so I think the other thing that was maybe a difference, or what I think I experienced at Ball State versus Saginaw Valley, I think there was a level of significant support from alumni, from the chapters at Ball State versus maybe the support we got, or maybe the support I saw at Saginaw Valley from alumni, outside of maybe a few of our primary advisors. But it was a transformational learning experience for me to go to Ball State, work in the Office of Student Life with their fraternity and sorority community for 2 years, to prepare me for my career. I can't speak highly enough about the master's program that I went to at Ball State, and in my experience. I think we talk a lot about theory to practice, right, in higher education, student affairs, and I think the focus on that, and the focus on being a practitioner in higher education that I got from Ball State, really had set me up for success, and the experiences I had to be successful as a full-time professional working with fraternities and sororities.
Love it. Really good. Now, right now, you're administering the primary recruitment and the membership intake process for all councils, all chapters at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. So what's your advice to chapters and councils around the country as we start to look towards the fall recruitment and intake process? Are there things that chapters should be doing right now in order to get ready for that?
Such a good question. So I think there's a few things. One, I would say this, and I say this to our students: we need to be following the science and the guidance that's provided by the Center for Disease Control, and then our state or local public health bodies, because they are going to help us know how to best navigate the systems and the processes that we're going to have in the fall. But I think outside of that, just like that general guidance, I think it's asking the questions about what is our process going to look like in the fall. And that could be starting with asking questions to your advisors, asking questions, and I mean your chapter advisors, but also to your fraternity and sorority advisor, and whoever that might be on your campus. Asking questions to your national organization about what is the expectation, what is the policies that they have in place, because that's going to differ across the board, right? I think as we have been planning here, and I think this is kind of where I'll share a little bit about, like, what I've advised and what I've asked our students to do, is really to think about how are we going to do recruitment, or how are we going to manage membership intake in a world where we are going to potentially have more on-ground students, but also are going to have students who are going to be completely virtual and still want to engage in the fraternity and sorority experience. How do you set up ways for both of those things to happen? I think that is going to be a continued question and an ask, because I think as we've learned, there are ways to offer a fraternity and sorority membership experience for students who are completely virtual. And we've been able to do that, and we've been able to be successful in a lot of ways. So how do we continue that, even as we do have a more traditional on-campus, on-ground experience in the coming semesters? We've been planning. The other piece out there is our IFC and our Panhellenic groups have been able to do things in person, where I think many of our NPHC organizations and our MGC or NALFO groups have been given a lot of guidance around not doing things in person, including but not limited to membership intake. And so working in supporting them in seeing if there's opportunities to do virtual membership intake, I think is really going to be important for fraternity and sorority advisors, but also I think for students to be asking questions about, because I was just having a conversation with my team about this. What I am concerned about is if we are not seeing all of our groups being able to adapt to whatever our new environment will be in the fall, I'm concerned about the success and the continued growth of some of our groups on our campus, if I'm being as honest as I can. And I'm really hopeful that as somebody in my role as a fraternity and sorority advisor and working with students, one, that across any campus, that they know that those groups, the students and our advisors and the university staff, should come together and have those conversations about what does fall look like? How can we get prepared? The other thing I would suggest is as I kind of mentioned about the not realizing how many resources are out there. Google fraternity recruitment. Google, I'm going to give a plug. Fired Up Productions does a lot of really good work, I think, around this area. They have a lot of free resources that are open and available that I literally had no clue Fired Up existed until I went to grad school. And that's no shade to Fired Up. That is I was a student. I had no idea what Fired Up even meant. And so being somebody who now has that capacity and understanding, I'm sharing those resources with our students that are related to their experience in our fraternity and sorority community, so that they can review them, see how it might help them in their organizational processes as they're planning for what fall recruitment, what membership intake is going to look like, and just in general, what does joining mean for fraternities and sororities? The other thing, and I feel like I apologize for going so long on this one, but I think the other thing that I think groups need to be prepared for is to be able to articulate the membership cost and what students are getting out of it. I think there has been a huge call to action of being as transparent as possible with our membership dues and what students are going to get out of it. Are you an all-inclusive group that they pay one fee in the fall or one fee in the spring? That is it. They get everything that they get out of their membership experience with that fee. Or is it here's the fees that you're going to pay, and then if we do different events with our organization or with other members, there's going to be some out-of-pocket costs that you're going to have to incur. And maybe what is that potential out-of-pocket expense that is going to be in the fall or in the spring? I think that is one of those pieces that I think is sometimes a afterthought, and I think it needs to be a proactive thought, because that is something that I think students are going to be wanting to learn about, because they need to make decisions about which organizations they can afford and which organizations they're going to get right the best bang for your buck for, and still having a fraternity or sorority experience. Because again, as you know, and I assume many of our listeners know, there's the whole, well, I'm not paying for my friends, right? And while we, I think, still struggle with that a little bit across our campuses, I think showing the value add that your fraternity or sorority membership has and where those costs are going helps to destigmatize that phrase and that concept, because you're it's going to all of these really great things that are benefiting you and are going to help you be a better leader on our campus and be a better person in the world.
I love it. We should talk about student conduct also, because there's been a lot of student conduct cases in the news that I've been reading. Students on college campuses today, they seem to have complaints about the process. And in your role, you have responsibilities that relate to chapter conduct, investigation, the sanctioning process. So how do you ensure that the process is fair for all students, that students understand the impact on the community, and that they develop good decision-making skills towards a successful future?
Great question. So I think first and foremost, the fraternity and sorority advisor, and I will use it as a singular example. A fraternity and sorority advisor that has maybe one or two people on their team, they cannot be the judge, the jury, and the executioner for the conduct process on your campus related to fraternities and sororities. It does not set up success for the students. It doesn't set up success for the Fraternity and Sorority Life office for that person to have every single responsibility related to conduct. And I say that because we have transitioned a little bit in my role. So my responsibility is really to help students navigate conduct, because we know it is a process, and it is a different process on every single campus. And sometimes reading the nuanced language in a code of conduct can be challenging for a student, and let's be honest, some of our staff to understand. And so I think to ensure that the process is fair, one is so that they have an advocate from the Fraternity and Sorority Life office that can walk them through it. That person, and for SIV, that's me. I am not involved in the investigation of the organization. However, I am very much so a collaborator with our Office of Student Conduct to help them understand the nuanced language and words that are maybe used in fraternities and sororities that maybe are not used in student organizations. The other piece that I think has been really built and cultivated over the last few years at SIUE, and I think I would strongly encourage and recommend, is the conduct process needs to also include the international organization or some level of representation from that organization if they don't have an executive office. And I say that because, I always think about it as like a triangle, right? There's our headquarters staff or our regional representatives, there's the university, and then there's the local chapter and the local chapter advisors. All of us need to be in communication and working together, because we know that sometimes when there is a conduct violation or an alleged violation of a code, a potential challenge is that chapter is going to get sanctioned, and that could mean suspension from the campus, that could mean loss of recognition, that could mean a lot of different things on a lot of different campuses. And so having all of the people who are really here as resources and support from a lot of different lenses being a part of this process is really important. And so we very much so are strong communicators with our national organizations in managing this process, because they are a part of it with us. Because also, if the decision is made that an organization did violate our code, most likely it's probably a violation of their national organization's policies as well. So we want to jointly address it, because some of the things that a national organization can do in terms of the education, the understanding like your impact on a community, that's going to sound very different from a national organization person or maybe an advisor than it is from me or somebody in our conduct office. So I think that to me is the really important piece around conduct, is making sure that it is a collaborative process, but it is also a process that allows for the organization to be seen as innocent until proven guilty, right? I think that piece is really important, because I think we want to set students up for success. We know people make mistakes. Now, some of those mistakes are larger than others, and those things unfortunately may not allow for a educational opportunity, right? Sometimes that educational opportunity is your organization's being removed from campus for an X amount of time, and we need to talk about why that happened. But when there are opportunities to provide educational support and education around the violation or around what has happened, I think that is where we see success. I don't believe that having blanketed sanctioning processes is helpful, because every organization may need something different in terms of what is going to allow them to understand and learn about the mistakes that have been made.
Yeah, I love the approach that you're taking. I've certainly made mistakes as an undergraduate, as a grad student, as a professional. I mean, I continue to make mistakes and I learn from them, and you move forward as best you can. So I like that you're providing those educational opportunities for the students on an undergraduate level. I think it's so key for them and their learning abilities there. One of the things that I think about is, as you know, the parents of several students who died in hazing cases have been traveling the country, talking to fraternity and sorority communities for the recent years. And there were two serious hazing cases just recently in the news on college campuses. I was talking to Hank Newer earlier this morning about the VCU case and the Bowling Green case as well. And you planned the FSL Leadership Summit for students on campus at SIUE. So what needs to change about the educational programming approach in order to end hazing in this country?
Great question. Mike, I want to mention one thing you said about like you made mistakes when you were an undergrad. I think talking to students about that in and of itself, I think is something we need to normalize. That yes, we're professionals, yes, we're advisors. We made mistakes, and it's okay to talk about them, because I think it allows for the student to know that oh, it does happen. So I think that piece is so important that, like, I don't talk openly all the time about it, but when I talk with students when they're facing challenges with the code of conduct on our campus, like, it's okay. I've made mistakes too.
Yeah.
Here's how you navigate it. It's okay. Like, because I think there's this, like, almost this feeling of dichotomy that, like, we were perfect as undergraduate students, that we never made mistakes. I think I will tell you, and again, I just think is a blessing that I have. Our conduct team on our campus are both affiliated humans. And so they bring a lens of a sorority or fraternity experience to their work that I think is just a benefit that we have. That I know that is not a thing on all campuses, which is fine. And I don't think is needed, but I think it allows for also some different types of conversations for somebody who's had a fraternity or sorority experience. But to your question about, I think every day when we see a new post or news story about another person who has died related to hazing, I continue to question how can we continue to see this happening? Like, how do fraternities in particular, how are we seeing this death and this going like, that's not us. We're not doing anything wrong. Because every group, I think, that we've seen have a death probably said that, and then they had a death.
Correct.
And they're like, what? Well, how? And I continue to struggle with how we are continuing to see this happen. I think some of the things that we've done, you mentioned the families that have been traveling. And again, we were talking about this right before we started recording, the opportunities that have opened up with having virtual programming, the Love Mom and Dad program that has been able to be offered more broadly and nationwide, I think has been fantastic. We actually, right before COVID hit, we had Evelyn Piazza and Debbie Debrick come to SIU's campus and talk to our students directly. And that was like very, very powerful for our students, because we did a large campus-wide session that was open to anybody, but obviously it was directed towards our fraternities and sororities. But I think the piece that really hit home was after the keynote that we did and the conversation, we had a debrief and like a more intimate conversation with our chapter and our council leadership about what role that they need to play as leaders in our community to stop stuff like this from happening. And really we talked about, we have the little H hazing and we have the big H hazing, right? Big H hazing is all the stuff we're seeing in the news and when people are dying. The little H stuff is like the smaller things that you're like, it's not a big deal. Example I'll use for SIUE that we continue to work on. We have, everyone probably on campus has like the little cards that have like meal swipes on them or has an X amount of dollars you can spend each semester. Asking your new members to swipe you in places or to pay for things for you, while they think that is not that big of a deal, it is a small thing that can lead to larger things, right? It's those gateway hazing experiences that we don't call hazing, but are, because you're still using your power over a person to ask them to do something. And so when we talk about the education that needs to happen, it cannot be once a year during National Hazing Prevention Week. It needs to be ongoing. I think any state that has a strong hazing policy or hazing law, I think those are going to really help in helping our students understand what that actually means in implementation, right? I know there are I think there's several laws out there I know that are being worked on and talked about. I think the one that I'm thinking most closely about is the one in the state of Ohio that is being, I think it's Collins Law. And so thinking about, if that passes, what does that mean for students? How do we help them understand a law that applies to them, and what does that look like? I think the other thing after the most recent deaths that happened, I think, and I took this actually from a fellow fraternity member, fellow fraternity brother, Kevin Carey, who works at Illinois Wesleyan. And we did a recommitment to hazing prevention in our community and sent out resources, sent out hey, when you join, you sign a commitment that you're not going to haze and you're not going to allow yourself to be hazed. We encourage you to recommit to this today, because we know that it has to be constant, it has to be ongoing, and it has to be in different platforms in different ways. The other thing I would share that I think, the two pieces, and then we can move to the next piece. Number one, hazing happens in more than just our fraternities and sororities, and we have to have buy-in from colleges and universities that hazing cannot be something that falls on the Fraternity and Sorority Life office. We have to be a role in. We have to have a part and a role in that. We cannot be the only ones doing hazing education. So there needs to be investment in time, staff, and resources, financially, I think in particular, to do some really good things that is more long-term across the campus if we want to see actual change. Because when our fraternities and sororities are being asked to do all this anti-hazing work, we know we need to work on that. There are other groups that do too. The other piece of this, though, that I think is, what's the word I want to use? Maybe even harder to tackle is they are coming to college, and that when they come to college, it's probably not the first time they've been hazed. We know hazing is also happening in our high schools, on sport teams and bands, and probably in organizations in some capacity at high school. So like, how do we take something that they have learned and developed in terms of power dynamics and power and control before coming to us, tell them they shouldn't be doing this, help them understand it, and get it out. It needs to start before they come to a college or a university, because I think it is pervasive beyond just colleges and universities. And until we can really tackle the power and the control and this, I think the sociological feeling of needing to be accepted, until we can tackle that and get it to happen prior to them coming to us with the continued education we need to do on a college or university, we're going to continue to see, I think, hazing happen. But all of the work that is being done by more power to those families who have given more than I think they should have had to give, to including the loss of their children to this cause, because I think it really speaks volumes that national organizations, colleges and universities, all these large institutions haven't been able to address it. And so finally family members were like, okay, enough's enough. We need to do something. Like, I just can't imagine being a family member, sending my son off to college and not seeing them come back. Like that I just got goosebumps saying that. So like, I know that we have work to do, and we need to be doing better in so many ways.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. My son is a sophomore in high school right now. And so he's looking at colleges and universities, looking at, the Vanderbilts right down the road for me in Nashville. And I think about that. I think about all of that all the time. And thank you for doing the debrief after some of those sessions. I think that is a really critical component. Yes, the family stories are very, very powerful, but the question then becomes, how do we get rid of this hazing practice that's in our chapter now? Because now we know it's wrong. We know what some of the possible repercussions are, but how do we get rid of it? And I think that is the question, getting it to the next steps and figuring out, how do we have replacement activities? How do we actually remove any hazing behaviors that currently exist? And that, I think, is what the students are going to need some help with. And to your point, I agree. I think the recommitting that you talked about, I think, was fantastic. We have to be talking about this at a minimum every 6 months. If we haven't spoken to them in 6 months, we've never spoken to them about this particular topic, because we have new students that are coming in every semester, and we have to continuously reinforce this message all the time, whether we are virtual or in person. We've got to be doing it. We have to be doing it all the time. It doesn't go away because now we're in a virtual environment.
No, it doesn't. And I think I think some of the conversations we've started to have, and I think I'm seeing them across other spaces as well, is we are gearing up for a semester that I don't think anyone is ready for. Right. Our students are going to be able to come back more in person, and they're going to be ready to do stuff that they haven't been able to do in a year. And unfortunately, some of that is some of the hazing activities and behaviors that I think there's a whole group that has never experienced that. So being prepared to do that education much more upfront, so that they don't revert back to things, right? Like, I think we always have done this. This is what we always do. You can't say that because you've had a year where you haven't been able to do it. So let's rethink about all of our processes and what we do, because it doesn't have to be like it was, because for a whole year we couldn't do it those ways. Yeah. So.
This is a good time, I think, to reset fraternity, reset sorority, and kind of look at those policies, procedures, and figure out, what is the best way forward, and maybe abandon some of those other things that maybe have been embedded in the culture in our chapter for many years. So we need to think about that. Now, we love good food here at Fraternity Foodie, so we can't miss this question. What is your favorite restaurant near campus at SIUE, and what do you usually go to order?
Oh my gosh. So, I love food. I won't lie. It is absolutely a love language of mine. So I'll be honest, I had a tough time thinking about just limiting it to one. So I might have to share a couple. But in downtown, so I'll be honest, in downtown Edwardsville, we have these banners up on our lamppost that it literally says Edwardsville, a foodie type of town.
Oh.
And so we have this restaurant, it's called Cleveland Heath. And it's gourmet comfort food, and they have the best deviled eggs I've ever had. They're made with Parmesan, garlic, hot sauce, and chives, and they are just like, they're such a good starter for their food. And then they make these homemade biscuits that are cheddar drop biscuits, and they come with a seasonal jam. Those are probably like the top two, like, I would say, side things that they make that are really delicious. It's probably one of my favorite places to go, if I'm being honest, when someone comes in. The other place that I can't not talk about is Sergeant Pepper's Cafe. And so the reason I have to give a plug for them is, honest to God, it is one of the first places I went when I was here. And anytime I have a visitor, not during COVID, of course, and we can go to restaurants, I take them to Sergeant Pepper's Cafe, because it's a thing that's in Illinois, but I had never heard of it before I came here. They're called horseshoes. Do you know what a horseshoe is?
No, never heard of one.
Okay, so I had never heard of it either. So it's a thing that is in Illinois. They originated in Springfield. And they're in several different restaurants, but we have them at Sergeant Pepper's. And so I'm gonna explain the one I always get. It's called the Buffalo Chicken Horseshoe. It is buffalo chicken tenders served on Texas toast, stacked with French fries, covered in cheese sauce. Oh my, it is so good. They have a variety of them. And if you want a smaller one, you can get a pony shoe, is what it's called. But it is just so gluttonous, I guess is the best word I can use. And they do like queso sauce, or they do like just like a yellow cheese sauce. You can do both if you'd like. You can do like a half and half. It is just, they're my favorite places. And so if you ever have a chance to visit Edwardsville, those would be my two places to suggest. I mean, Edwardsville is just such a, what's the word I'm gonna use? Such a foodie type of town. And Sergeant Pepper's, as the name is a full on, like, the theme in the restaurant is all Beatles, from Sergeant Pepper's, from the album from the Beatles. So it is there's just so many great foods in Edwardsville, and right across the river is St. Louis, that's got tons of great food.
Oh yeah, see, this is why I love Edwardsville. They know good food. It's delicious. And somebody who's an alum of the University of Buffalo, as soon as you mention buffalo chicken, I'm like, I'm in. All right, let's go. It sounds amazing.
Oh my God, yeah, it is. My I don't want to skip or share too soon, but on my Instagram, like, while it is a lot of my like personal stuff, it's also become what I would consider part of my like foodie Instagram, because anytime I try a new restaurant, or even if it's a restaurant I've tried before but I just love the food, I've been sharing what I've gotten and how I enjoyed it and where to go get it, like, because I just think food is such a love language and brings people together, like you said at the beginning, that I love to show people where to get some really great food. Probably the most creative thing I've done recently is I went over to St. Louis, and I had a burrito-sized sushi roll, which was just out of this world. So 10 out of 10 recommend foodie adventures for everybody.
All right, so if our listeners have questions, they want to see all of the food that you're ordering there in Edwardsville, where can they go in order to connect with you on social media?
Great question. So most of my visual stuff you'll see on my Instagram. My handle is Tyler S. Manning. Pretty simple. It's my first name, my middle initial, and my last name. And that is actually my handle across all of my social media platforms. So feel free to give me a follow, give me a like, and I look forward to connecting with you.
That sounds great. Tyler S. Manning. It's Tyler, the letter S, Manning. Tyler, you are amazing. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. Obviously, we love having professionals like you in the industry that are out there fighting the good fight for fraternities and sororities. The fact that you're a Sigma Pi makes it even better. Certainly, I want continued success for you in your career. So please let us know how we can support you going forward. And thank you so much for the time. Thank you to our audience for listening. If you like Tyler's presentation and his talk today, give him a thumbs up, give him a like on social media, share it with other fraternity and sorority students around the country. And thank you so much, Tyler. You're amazing.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me on the Fraternity Foodie podcast. And for everyone there that's listening, thank you for listening to the story, and make fraternity and sorority a great experience for you and for those coming after you, and enjoy some great food.
That sounds great. All right. Thank you so much to our listeners. We'll see you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Thanks so much. Bye for now.